park here for the debate?
Sure. I assume the press?
Yes, CR News. I'm a shoestring operation, but no, I won't CR News.
Okay. I think we're all filled up in here.
There was a spot over there.
Yeah, but obviously the cones are there.
What about that spot on the end there?
That would be the president's spot, so that one's always coned off.
Isn't he in Martha's Vineyard? Oh, the other president, the college
president.
Yeah. I'm joking. All right, so what do I do?
That's a good question. Hang on, let me grab.
I got 20 minutes. I'll hang.
Just follow her.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very, very good. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Middlesex Community College. My name is Patrick Cook. I'm Executive Director of Public Affairs here at the college. I welcome you on behalf of President Cowan to our Lowell campus. As I said at our first debate, we also welcome you here to our federal building, which was built in 1931, and it used to be the former home of the United States Post Office. It was home of our Veterans Affairs for the city of Lowell. It was also our immigration hearings were held here. It was the offices for former Congresswoman Edith Norris Rogers. It was also Paul Songers's first congressional office was in this building. The college acquired it in 1996. We opened it in 2004, and it now serves as our library and community meeting space for us. We're very proud to be hosting these debates. This will be our fifth one in partnership with some of our media partners from the Lowell Sun, the Salem News, and the Fitchburg Sentinel and Enterprise. These have been very valuable so far, and we know that this will be just as rewarding. A couple housekeeping items, just if we could quickly, just make sure everybody's got their cell phones on silent. When I introduce our moderator, he's going to explain there are a number of, we do welcome and encourage people to be tweeting live and taking photos live. We just ask that you not be interrupting the flow up in front here in terms of the cameras. There are some fixed video cameras that are in place, so we'd rather that we didn't have people roaming back and forth between those and the candidates, and to respect the decorum of that. So with that, I'd like to introduce the gentleman who's going to be serving as the moderator for this debate. He's been leading the charge on pulling these debates together for the Lowell Sun, but has also been bringing together media partners and reached out to us very early on to begin hosting these. And I'd like to welcome Jim Campanini, the editor of the Lowell Sun, to the podium.
It's the first applause I've received in a long time since the Little League, I think. But I want to thank you all for being here and coming out. This is an important election for all officers, and I appreciate participating. I thank the candidates for also participating. We have to your left Charlie Baker, and next to him is Mark Fisher. Thank you for coming today. Our panelists, from the left, Tom Zupa, the managing editor at The Sun. We have Pat Damaris, who's the Assistant Dean of International and Multicultural Affairs at Middlesex Community College. Okay. And Chris Kamir, the city editor of the Sentinel and Enterprise of Fitchburg. Before we begin the debate, I want you all to rise and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please hold your applause till the end, until the debate is concluded. We want to get in as many questions as we can and limit the distractions. Rules are simple. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer a panelist's questions. And then there will be a time for a 30-second rebuttal. the moderator reserves the right to ask a follow-up question if he does not think that the question has been answered properly, or if any candidate is filibustering. So, I don't think we'll have any problem with that anyway. If the candidates hear this noise, that's not a Tony Orlando song, not 3 times. That means you're going too long. Please wrap it up, okay? With that, we will start the debate. We had a draw before we just started, and Mr. Fisher will get the first question, and we'll start from Tom Zupa. No, wait a minute, let's start with Chris Camille, alphabetical order. It'll be easier for me to remember. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. The state budget has increased $10 billion since 2006, and yet the total amount of state and local aid to cities and towns remains $400 million less than pre-recession levels. What's happening here?
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a Democrat problem. Local aid should be increased, and I think the problem here stems from illegal immigration. We have plenty of funds to go to illegal immigrants, tons of funds. It's $2 billion a year. We have a current sitting attorney general who says it's not illegal to be illegal in Massachusetts. Under a Fisher administration, it will be. And what does that do? It frees up $2 billion a year. Divide that number by the number of cities and towns in the state of Massachusetts. That's $5 million in local aid. $5 million. Police, firefighters, teachers, however they want to be used. Here's the solution to the problem right there.
Mr. Baker?
Excuse me. First of all, thank you very much for having us all here today. Appreciate this opportunity to be in Lowell again. One of the things I've pledged during the course of this campaign, which none of the Democrats have pledged, is that I will increase local aid at the same rate that state tax revenue grows. Because over the course of, you pointed out, Chris, over the course of the past 10 years, state spending has gone up dramatically and local aid has gone down. The other thing I pledged, and remember, Karen Polito and I are both former members of our Board of Selectmen, me and Swampscott and her and Shrewsbury. We get the drill when it comes to the relationship between state government and local government. The other thing we've committed is no more unfunded mandates. I mean, in addition to the fact that cities and towns are down $500 million in local aid, every year the Commonwealth of Mass comes up with something they think is a good idea, and they basically just drop it on the cities and towns and say, here, you figure it out, but they don't actually put forth the money to help them pay for it. In our administration and as governor, there will be no unfunded mandates on cities and towns. And as I said before, state tax revenue goes up, local aid is going to go up right along with it. My final comment on this one is I do believe this is part of one-party government. You only have one team on the field. If it's all Democrats, one of the things that happens is you don't have the kind of accountability and fiscal discipline in the governor's office that's required to make sure that we don't forget that there's a big part of government that really matters to people, and it's called local government. And it should be a partner of the Commonwealth of Mass. We can't have a great state if we starve our cities and towns.
Mr. Fisher, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. So under Charlie's scenario, if tax revenues grow, local aid will go up. It'll go up by a certain amount. I'm talking about $5 million each and every year by solving the problem of illegal immigration. He mentioned his status as a selectman. When he was selectman, he chose to raise taxes. Raise taxes. That's how he chooses to raise revenues. We live in a state where President Kennedy told us, if you want to raise revenues, what do? You cut taxes. That's the way to raise revenues.
Mr. Baker, 30 seconds.
You know, the great thing about being a local official, and the great thing about having been in the public game for a while, I was part of the gang that held on to and delivered Prop 2.5, which has been, I think, one of the most successful laws that's ever been passed here in Massachusetts, which limits the growth in property taxes. And if any community in Massachusetts wants to raise taxes for any purpose at all, they have to go to the voters in their community and get a vote to make it happen. And there's never been, in my opinion, anything more successful at creating what I would describe as sort of credibility and honesty and transparency and accountability as Prop 2.5.
Thank you. Question number 2, Pat Damaris.
Thank you. As a product of the American dream, I was the first in my family to go to college and own my home. I feel that my children and many other young people in the Commonwealth who are burdened with college loans aren't able to fulfill their dreams of owning a home. What are some of the initiatives that you propose or support to make this a reality for thousands of Massachusetts residents?
And that's from Mr. Baker.
It's a great question, Pat, and as the father of one out, one in, and one going, I am well aware of the high cost of a college education. We've made a series of proposals with respect to this issue, and as governor, we would pursue them aggressively. The first one is, I think the public higher ed system ought to be willing to offer people a 3-year degree. Why do kids have to go to college for 4 years if they can get through it in 3? That all by itself will cut the cost of higher education by 25% for a lot of kids, and there are many private colleges that currently make that available. Second thing I think the public system should do, and as governor I would pursue this as well, we need to offer more online classes and more online services for kids. I mean, one of the things that's terrific about online education is you can take it when you can take it. You don't have to show up and take it when the class is available and being offered. It's also a lot less expensive, and I think if you combine it with on-campus and in-classroom activity, you can create a far less expensive way to educate kids and deliver the same product. Third thing I think we need to do, Northeastern has the most successful co-op program in America. They're right down the street from the State House. I have no idea why the Commonwealth of Mass hasn't engaged them in a significant conversation about how we could go about creating the same kind of co-op program in our public higher ed system that they have. It's been a masterful tool for kids to be able to leverage. You combine that, by the way, with online education, and you create a wonderful opportunity for kids to be able to work, earn money, prepare for their future after they graduate from college, and reduce the net cost of college for them.
Mr. Fisher, you're going to have a few extra seconds to deliver your response.
Sure. You could have knocked me in.
I think part of this problem stems from the fact that we've told too many kids that success only comes from a college education and all the debt that goes along with it. I have 4 college degrees, but when I graduated from high school, I did not go to college. Rolled up my sleeves, joined a union, and learned the value of a buck. What I would like to do is, back in middle school, it was called junior high when I was going to school, we had wood shop, we had metal shop, we had vocational skill programs, we had home economics. Those are gone now for middle school students. I want to reintroduce those. I think, if nothing else, we want to broaden students' exposure to these things so they can find out what gifts and talents they have, what they like to do, what they do best. They step forward and test the waters. I was looking for 6 machinists 6 years ago. I went to Worcester Voc. They had 1 student in the machining program at Worcester Voc. This is because we pushed too many kids into college and all the debt that goes along with it. They are good paying jobs as mechanics, plumbers, electricians, carpenters. We need to tell kids it's okay to do those types of things, but in order to start the process, we've got to introduce those types of vocational skill programs in the middle schools. Be a big advocate for that.
Thank you. Any rebuttal at all?
Well, believe it or not, I agree with Mark.
No.
I think the Voc schools are a real hidden gem in the Massachusetts educational system. I visited many of them, and by the way, I was out in Springfield yesterday and spent time with a tool manufacturer, and they made clear to me that they have plenty of jobs. Their big issue is finding people with the skills to actually bring them in. And the Pioneer Valley out in Springfield where I went, there are 3,000 machinists currently working out there, and at any given time, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 jobs for skilled workers out there. Welders, steam fitters, pipe fitters, machinists. And I think we need to be very aggressive about coming up with ways to help kids build that runway that would get them through middle school into VOC-Tech. And I've also thought that either we need VOC-Tech schools to establish relationships with community colleges that can turn into associate degrees in some of these fields. Or in some cases, maybe we give the VOC-Tech schools the ability to offer associate degrees on their own. There are a lot of great jobs people can make a good living with out there.
Jim Knock.
Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Fisher, would you like to add anything to that at all? Briefly.
I just think that this is a great area where kids need to be exposed into it, and the whole idea of time on task within the education system and teaching to the test has gone way overboard. And in order to do those things, they've had to eliminate these programs that I was talking about earlier. Common Core, which is another thing that's going to be introduced or has been introduced in the state, which I am totally against, would keep wood shop, metal shop, vocational skill programs out of the schools. That's one of the big reasons that I'm against Common Core as well.
Thank you. Mr. Zupa.
Or
Mark Fisher.
Mr. Fisher, how would your administration address the massive failures we've seen in the Department of Children and Families?
Yeah, I combine it with the drug lab scandal, and I combine it with the compounding pharmacy scandal. I think the solution is pretty simple, actually, but it's interesting, the heads of those departments, when they were let go or resigned or moved from the head of the department to a consultancy position, complained about the fact that these problems occurred deep down inside of very big, very large organizations. And that was the problem why they didn't find out that they were problems until much later, and they festered and got much, much bigger. The solution is this. My wife works for the Worcester Public Schools, and she is a mandated reporter of child abuse. What I would say is any government employee or any employee that works under a government agency would be a mandated reporter of fraud, abuse, and scandal. When Annie Dugan was doing what she did with the drug labs, her fellow workers knew that she couldn't do that kind of work. It was too much. But they were afraid to say something about it, didn't have whistleblower protection. I would add that as well. So when something is found out, people are mandated to go out and report to local authorities or to yourselves in the media. That will get the problem out initially. It won't stir, it won't fester, it won't create a huge problem. So mandated reporting.
Mr. Bacon?
You know, the first thing I would say is that Massachusetts had an opportunity to fix the Department of Children and Families before the crisis of Jeremiah Oliver's disappearance. There's a children's rights group in Maryland that filed suit against the Commonwealth of Mass almost over just about a year before the Jeremiah Oliver case broke. And the governor and Martha Coakley, the Attorney General, rather than reading that brief, which was incredibly compelling and moving to fix what was wrong at the department, fought that brief and made the argument that even though it was, let's call it uncomplimentary with respect to the department, it wasn't bad enough to justify engaging in a settlement discussion. There was an opportunity to fix this before some of the real tragedies came down the road. Now, with respect to what I would have done, I put out a plan as soon as the Jeremiah Oliver case broke that laid out what I would have done. And okay, just checking.
No, no.
And my plan basically had 5 points. The first thing was, remember, DCF is organized in regions, and each region operates to some extent on its own. Now, what you really need to understand to fix something like that is what's going on in each region, where the soft spots are, and where the opportunities to improve are. And I had 5 key criteria for this. What's the caseload, the average caseload in each region, and how big is the spread between the highest and the lowest caseload? Second, what's the relationship between the daycare providers, the schools, and the police departments in each region? Those are the eyes and ears of the department most of the time. Third, how many grievances are outstanding in each region, and how long have those grievances been outstanding? That tells you a lot about the relationship between management and the folks on the ground doing the work. Number 4, screen in and screen out on child abuse reports. One of the big issues you find is, you know, if you don't know sort of why people are screening them in and why they're screening them out, and have a record with respect to that, you don't necessarily know how each region is actually performing its fundamental task, which is dealing with that issue. You just collect that data, and you could have collected it in 2 weeks. You would have a pretty good idea right
Number
away
5, Mr. Baker?
Right away about where the opportunities in each region were to actually fix what was broken.
You want to add number 5 to that, Earl?
I did, but
Mr. Fisher, you're going to have some time here if you want to rebut that.
Sure. I think that's the typical bureaucratic political solution that's offered by a lot of state officials. You know, top-down review and so forth and so on. And it takes a number of months, and it's out of the news, and the reports come back, and little of anything is done. Mandated reporting. Mandating reporting is the solution. There are other elements that can be looked at. I've talked with people who worked as foster parents. Some interesting stuff. We know that the caseworker follows the individual. They don't go to the home. So I talked to a foster mother who had 3 children, 3 foster children. She was visited by 3 different caseworkers. It seems like it's pretty logistics solution here. The caseworker should be assigned to the home. You know, transfer the paperwork if you need to. It shouldn't have to be visited by 3 different caseworkers to one home. That sounds like a pretty easy fix. But to get that information, it has to bubble up from the people who are there, the foster mothers, the foster fathers. And let's be open and be able to take their information and act upon it. Some pretty low-hanging fruit there.
Just one question, follow-up. Why does reform in Massachusetts always cost more than the system that was already in place? Mr. Baker, I mean, it seems that the legislature has thrown more money at the DSF problem for the last 2 years, and it seems like every time there's a problem, crisis, a website more money on top of money. I mean, is this justified? Is it something that is just the way government operates?
I think that's another great example of one-party rule on Beacon Hill. If you're not, if you don't have what I would call kind of the constructive friction that comes from having both teams on the field engaged in an active public debate about solving problems, yeah, you do end up with solutions that usually end up costing more. I mean, Martha Coakley and Steve Grossman are both proposing $2 billion in new spending, which will be followed, of course, by $2 billion in new taxes. That is not the way to solve most of these problems. There's this calculus that says that the problem is always about how much you spend. It's not about how you spend it. I happen to think the opposite. I think in many cases you start with how you're spending the money, and that's where your big opportunity to chase reform and actually end up with a better product that costs less comes from. And that's certainly the way it's worked, both when I've been in the public and in the private sector.
Mr. Fisher?
I think, Jim, you sort of hit on it. I think this is part of the nature of a government. There is no competition. What's the incentive to do things better, or to do things more efficiently? In private business, it's there. You either do better or you're going to get eaten up by your competition. You're going to go out of business. It's part of the free market. That doesn't exist within government. So part of the solution I talked about earlier, being mandated reporters, that gets the problem outside of the system, to the media, to the local authorities. It's not going to be handled up through the chain of command or try to be resolved with a caucus or some sort of a symposium or some sort of a government program. Let's get it outside of government, and then we can talk about real reform and leaner, more cost-saving programs.
Thank you. Next question.
Attorney General Martha Coakley has received some criticism recently over her handling of the Partners Health deal and just this week the Brennan Group settlement over its lobbying contract with the Franciscan Hospital for Children. If you were governor, would you get involved in these deals and others that might not necessarily benefit the public?
Mr. Baker?
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay. I think what I said about the deal that the Attorney General proposed with respect to partners is, having read it, I think it will be enormously difficult to enforce. Parts of it I'm not even sure I understand, and I've been in the healthcare business for a really long time. And I also think it's not going to get us what we want, which is a more competitive system. The deal I would have recommended would have been full transparency with respect to price for partners. Keep in mind that the same service provided to the same person with the same outcome at 4 different provider organizations right around here can vary in price by 300 or 400%. And the reason it can vary in price by so much is because nobody knows how much anything costs anywhere. We need full transparency in healthcare. I think this would be a great opportunity to start that conversation by requiring partners to post their prices. Second thing we need to do with respect to that transaction is we need to make sure that partners is not able to add 550 more dollars to their bill. That will destabilize a number of other providers around partners, most of whom are less expensive and in many cases just as effective. With respect to the Brennan decision, I just think that's another great example of one-party government. All those people know each other, they've known each other forever, they have relationships that go way back, and I think the fact that the Attorney General settled on that particular case on those terms is an outrage.
Mr. Fisher?
I tend to agree with much of what Charlie said, and it's too bad you didn't have a chance to say that last night at our 7th forum that you missed on healthcare with former Governor Dukakis. But in addressing the cost of healthcare, I use the example of car insurance. With car insurance, we opened up the borders. We allowed out-of-state insurers to come into the state and compete. And our car insurance premiums went down by about 13%. We need to do that with health insurance as well. Secondly, again, using the same analogy with car insurance, we use car insurance for catastrophic types of things, collisions or theft, but we don't use it for routine expenses of gas, oil, wiper blades, tune-ups, tires, things like that. We choose where to go for that, and that's what keeps those kind of prices of those things lower. So, for example, even under Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, there is an option for catastrophic coverage. It's usually used by younger people, but the premiums are much lower. The savings from that go into the patient's pocket. I would want them then to choose routine care. They can choose where to go for their routine tests, what doctor, what medical facility, and that competition, that free market source, will drive prices lower and keep them lower. That's how I think we need to address the issue of cost containment within the healthcare industry.
But just simply yes or no to both of you. I mean, if a governor thinks that a constitutional officer has done something that is against the best interests of the people of Massachusetts, what recourse does a governor have to step in and say that's right or or wrong? I mean, that's what basically the question comes down to.
Well, in the case of the partners deal, as governor, the governor can submit a brief to the judge who's currently reviewing whether or not the settlement is in fact in the public interest, and that's what I think. That's where I think the opportunity rests there. With respect to the Brennan decision, I think the governor can call on others to conduct an investigation. I saw this morning that the Secretary of State is going to, which is sort of the appropriate. He oversees lobbyists and lobbying activities. The governor can certainly call on the Secretary of State to engage in an investigation, which the Secretary of State has.
Jim, so the Attorney General's office is an elected official. If she's done something illegal, then I agree exactly with what Charlie would propose. However, your question was, what if it's not something in the best interests of the citizens of the Commonwealth? Well, she's an elected official. That position is an elected office. We can use the bully pulpit of the governor's office and point these things out. Then it's up to the people who elect that person to say, is this the right thing? Is it in the best interest of us or not? And they have the final choice on that decision.
Thank you. Pat Damaris?
I think this is for Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Working with young people here at Middlesex Community College, I know how important education is to their success. Unfortunately, thousands of young men and women graduate from our high schools but are unable to attend or afford a college education because of their immigration status. Our state legislator has debated this issue a number of sessions, but as of today, Massachusetts is one of the states that does not allow for in-state tuition. If elected, what would you do to make this a reality for the hundreds of undocumented youth graduating from high school?
I would not make it a reality. I've said before, under Fisher administration, illegal immigration is illegal. By giving illegal immigrants in-state tuition, we are rewarding bad behavior. They have broken the law. I have 2 employees that have green cards, and one just told me 2 weeks ago that he passed the U.S. citizenship test. He's just waiting now where to go to take his oath of office. These people have done it the right way. They stood in line, they've waited their turn, they're played by the rules. People have come here illegally and broken the rules. It's a slap in their face. We don't want to reward that. Governor LePage up in Maine has just started doing what I suggested all along, and that's to cut off the benefits. And illegals will do what? They will self-deport, not to their home country, to the next big blue state. So now we're getting an influx. We're getting an influx of illegals from Maine. I want to do the same thing here in Massachusetts, so that influx goes from Massachusetts to New York or California. Illegal immigration is illegal.
Mr. Baker?
I don't support in-state tuition for undocumented and illegal immigrants either. And my primary reason for this is when taxpayers fund public education, the reason they fund public education is because they believe there is a positive benefit to the Commonwealth associated with doing that, and the positive benefit is the ability of those folks when they graduate from college to be able to work here in Massachusetts. The fact that illegal immigrants are not able to actually work upon graduation defeats the whole point of in-state tuition in the first place, which is to give people the ability to access a higher education so that they can work here.
Okay. Any rebuttal at all?
Yeah, Jim. 4 years ago, the Boston Herald ran a story that talked about how Charlie had funded organizations that supported in-state tuition for illegal immigrants and driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. So saying it is one thing, but backing it up with your actions. People have to see that you're consistent with your words and your actions. What do they believe, your words or your actions?
Mr. Baker, would you like to respond?
That's not true, okay? In the aftermath of 9/11 and the tragedy that involved the death on this soil of hundreds of thousands of American citizens, the Harvard Pilgrim Foundation set up a program that made it possible for the employees of Harvard Pilgrim, if they were working with community organizations, to be able to apply to the foundation to offer what we call mini grants, $100 to $500, or printing, or some other small benefit to those community-based organizations. A couple of people who worked at Harvard Pilgrim were involved with some organizations that they filed an application to the foundation for, and the foundation granted those applications. That's what we started.
So you need to take that up with the Boston Herald. It sounds like Harvard Pilgrim did not do the due diligence that it did to screen those organizations. Money went to those organizations.
You done? You done? Chris, come here. Next question.
No.
Tom.
Mr. Baker? Mr. Baker, we're in week 5 of the market basket standoff, which has affected 25,000 employees, millions of customers, and countless related businesses. How would you grade Governor Patrick's performance? And if you were governor, what would you have done?
Well, it's not over yet, okay? But I will say this. I think the governor should have made clear that his wife had a conflict straight out of the gate until waiting until he got asked by the media about it. I hope he was engaged in private conversations either with people at Market Basket directly or through intermediaries early on in that conversation. I know at some point he did choose to start to get involved in those conversations. Look, it's a private enterprise. It's a family-run business. I mean, most of the time my view is that privately family-run businesses should be able to do whatever they think makes sense, and there's really not much of a role for government to get involved in that. But when you're talking about a company that employs 25,000 people and has thousands of suppliers, many of which are also small businesses, and has a customer base that depends on and benefits from the fact that Market Basket historically has been, you know, anywhere from 12 to 20% below market with respect to what they charge for goods. They're an important part of the region and part of the economy. And I think the primary role governor can play in this one is to encourage and engage the parties that are involved to resolve as quickly as possible the dispute. And the fact that we're in week 5 here, and you now have suppliers who are stuck. I talked to one supplier a couple of weeks ago. He's a farmer. He grows flowers. He's lost over $100,000 because he can't sell his product in Market Basket, and there's nobody else who wants to buy it. The collateral damage this thing's going to create if it continues to drag on is going to be significant.
Mr. Fisher?
I think Governor Deval Patrick got too involved when he suggested to the employees they should go back to work. There are professional arbitrators. I mean, we have example after example of how not only this governor, but others in the past have not treated problems within government. We expect them to go out into a private industry and do any better. No, I think we should sit on the sidelines and watch this play out. This is a free market issue. I issued a press release recently about this. I admire the employees. I mean, many of these people are sacrificing possibly their houses with their mortgages on the line or their college education. And I likened it to the spirit of the Tea Party. I mean, they are fighting against the establishment of a private business. The Tea Party is fighting against the establishment of government and political parties. It's the same type of spirit. I admire it. I don't know how it's going to shake out. But here's what I told them. The demand for groceries is not going away. Even in the worst case scenario, if Market Basket were to fail, those employees, and they're very good employees, that's why customers come back to Market Basket. Those employees are going to be in high demand. Because the demand for groceries isn't going away. It's a supply and demand issue. It's a free market issue. It will play out. It's sad to say it's gone on this long, but the solution is not a government one. The free market will take care of it. I admire the spirit of the employees. I told them to stand their ground. It's an amazing thing. And this time of day, we talk about political corruption and how people will sell their office or this, that, and the other thing. These people are putting everything on the line for it. I think it's admirable. I'm going to watch how it plays out.
Mr. Baker, do you want to add anything to that?
I agree that these people are putting their lives and their mortgages and their kids' college educations on the line, and that's why I think it's important for the governor to be willing to encourage in whatever way works and cajole in whatever way works the leadership in both these in this organization to get its act together and resolve the problem so that these people can go back to work.
Mr. Fisher, anything?
Just quickly, once again, there were professional arbitrators who know how to do this best. And Deval Patrick is not the person we want to be out there cajoling employees to get back to work.
Chris, come in. Next question, and it's for Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
A law signed by the governor this summer now allows police chiefs to go to court to try to prevent a person from acquiring a rifle or a shotgun in addition to handguns, which they were already allowed to deny. Would you have supported this bill, and are there any additional steps that you as governor would take to curb gun violence?
No, I wouldn't have signed it. Massachusetts has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. If anything, we need to lighten them up. And the law that he passed did just that. There was one aspect of it. Massachusetts was the only state in the country that required an FID card for the purchase of pepper spray. My mom is 83 years old. She had to go get an FID card to get pepper spray to protect herself. The law that Governor Patrick just signed lowered the limit. I think if you're over 18 years old, you don't need an FID card to go get pepper spray. These laws that are passed in Massachusetts affect law-abiding gun owners. They do nothing to prevent gun violence. We need to enforce the existing laws that we have. And the story I tell, and I built my own shotgun. When I went to get my FID card many years ago, I counted the many number of laws that were on the books, any one of which you broke would prevent you from legally obtaining a gun, firearm in Massachusetts. There were 98. 98. So the moral of the story I tell people, if you want a good neighbor, find yourself a law-abiding gun owner, because they have to be squeaky clean. They've already been vetted by the police chiefs of Massachusetts.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I would have signed that law. There were three things I was looking for in the discussion and the debate about guns. The first was for Massachusetts to connect itself to the National Mental Health Database for purposes of doing background checks, which I think everyone, including many of my friends who own guns, felt was a good idea. Second was to enhance the penalties for certain kinds of crimes committed with a gun, which I think many people also think is a good idea. The third part, which I also believe will help us with respect to some of our urban violence issues, was to get serious about illegal gun trafficking. Law-abiding gun owners, in many cases, in most cases, almost all cases, are absolutely not the problem. But there's a tremendous amount of illegal trafficking going on in guns that the feds aren't paying attention to and the locals aren't paying attention to. And the idea of creating a state task force with the state police that will engage in establishing an illegal trafficking task force, I think is a really good idea, and we should have done it a long time ago. And I think in places where you have a significant amount of trafficking going on, this is a huge opportunity for us to take a lot of guns that are being moved illegally off the streets.
The two candidates for Attorney General are pushing smart gun technology. They say it would take care of a lot of this illegal gun trafficking, because the gun wouldn't work unless it has the fingerprint of the owner. Mr. Fisher, are you in favor of smart gun technology, or that just won't solve the problem?
No, again, I'm against it. Enforce the laws that we have. That will solve the problem. Here's the thing. I just think this is an enormous waste of time on the part of our state legislature. Many people are harmed and many people are injured through government incompetence. And all we have to go down is DCF, the drug lab scandal, the compounding pharmacy scandal. Let's solve those problems. There's where the injuries take place. There's where the deaths take place. They can't solve those problems, so they turn to legislation and pass it and try to pat themselves on the back and tell their constituents that they're doing something for them. And in fact, they're only targeting law-abiding gun owners. Let's solve the problem of government competence.
Mr. Baker, quickly, smart gun technology, your thoughts?
Well, I'm sort of a choice guy, and if somebody wants to purchase a gun that has smart gun technology, I think they should be allowed to do that. I don't think they should be required to do that.
Okay. Next question, Pat Damaris. It goes to Mr. Baker.
A recent report about the working poor living in the Commonwealth stated that 1 in 5 workers in the state make less than $12 an hour. What initiatives do you support or propose to help the many families in our Commonwealth that are struggling to pay their rent, buy food, and take care of their families?
I think the biggest thing we need to do with respect to this particular issue is grow the economy and create jobs. And that's the #1 issue I've talked about since I got into this race. And actually my first event as a candidate for governor was up here. I came up to Lowell and I went to the Emerging Technology Center at UMass Lowell. The reason I went there was because it was outside Route 128, it was a gateway city, and it was a public-private partnership between a collection of polymer and plastics manufacturers in the Merrimack Valley, working with UMass Lowell on a public-private basis to create applied research and basic research for new product development. It creates a great opportunity for those companies to continue to thrive and expand here in the Merrimack Valley, and creates a way for kids who are students to move into paid employment upon their graduation. And whether it's that kind of an approach or the many other strategies that I think we can pursue on a micro level, I think one of the things the next governor needs to do, and I would do this as governor, is focus fundamentally on creating jobs. We haven't created hardly any jobs in Massachusetts over the course of the past 15 years. We created 500,000 net new jobs in the 1990s. We also cut taxes 27 times and reformed workers' comp and took a real hard run at cleaning up our regulatory morass. And I think one of the things we need to do is get back to that. You clean up the regulatory morass, you control spending, you reduce taxes, you create a climate for growth, you'll generate jobs. If you generate jobs, people will be better off.
Mr. Fisher?
So I've had this experience where 4 of my previous employers have closed their doors and not gone out of business. They moved out of state. We've driven businesses, people, and jobs out of the state, and we've welcomed in illegal immigrants, many of whom are working at these low-paying jobs. I have a 4-point program to make Massachusetts business-friendly. We cut the corporate tax rate. We're in competition with other states. We cut the corporate tax rate to make it comparable to those states where we're driving businesses out. New York has done it. New York is second, believe it or not, liberal New York is second on the list of those states that are creating new jobs. They've done it because they've created 0 tax-free zones, and businesses are flocking there. We can do the same thing here in Massachusetts. Secondly, we stop the overburdensome rules and regulations that drive businesses out of Massachusetts and keep businesses from coming in. One quick story. A fellow a year ago that I know has a machine shop. He was fined $7,000 because the sign on his wall that said hazardous material didn't say hazardous waste. And rather than give him the 30 seconds to change it, he was fined $7,000. That's got to stop. Thirdly, we stopped the taxpayer funding of fad industries like Evergreen Solar. 58 million taxpayer dollars went to that company. In just 2 years, they closed their doors, moved to China, and 800 people lost their jobs. Lastly, we eliminate the obscure inventory tax. This keeps big distribution centers from coming here to Massachusetts because they would have to pay tax on all their inventory. But Massachusetts is in the center of New England. It's ideal for distribution centers to serve all of New England and New York. And they will bring with them good-paying jobs, material handling, logistics, administrative, and transportation. That's how we make Massachusetts business-friendly. You know, Charlie had mentioned in the Weld and Slucci administrations that we cut taxes 27 times. Well, that's interesting because Governor Slucci took the no new tax pledge, and he was proud to do it on numerous occasions. Governor Weld did it. I've done it. Charlie refuses to do it. Charlie refuses to do that. And as a selectman, he raised taxes. So what do you believe, what he says or what he's done?
Mr. Fisher, I want to give Mr. Baker a chance to rebut.
We cut taxes 27 times. I was part of that administration, and I'm proud of the work we did when I was in that administration. I think our tax code is too complicated, and in many cases, it's rigged. And I would like to be able to come up with a simpler, fairer way of managing our tax code here in Massachusetts. I'm not going to raise taxes. I've said that over and over. I mean it. But I do think if we can make the tax code simpler, we should.
Any additional comments, Mr. Fisher, quickly?
It's a Republican thing to do. Weld did it, Slucci did it. You did it 4 years ago. I've done it now. Stop telling people you're going to cut taxes. Do something. Sign the no new tax pledge.
Mr. Zupa, your question, and it goes to Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Fisher, next year the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education will be taking a vote on how to test students statewide. What's your philosophy on high-stakes testing?
We have the MCAS test, and we're #1 in the country. It's worked fine. Massachusetts should be the example for the rest of the country. We're talking about introducing this high-stake testing, the PARCC testing, through Common Core. It's a federal program, maybe even a higher than that program. Massachusetts shouldn't be adopting any new high-stakes testing. The testing that we have now does just a fine job. So I'm against Common Core, and I'm against the high-stake testing, the park test that goes along with it. I've taken a stand on it, and it's very clear. I will opt out of Common Core and the high-stakes testing that's associated with it, as New York has done, as Kentucky has done, as Florida has done. And I stand with the Chicago Teachers Union, and I stand with the New York Teachers Union, who are against Common Core and the high-stake testing as well.
Mr. Baker?
There's only one person in Massachusetts who testified against Common Core in 2010, and that was me. And the reason I testified against it was, there were three reasons. The first was, we were being asked to sign up for something that didn't exist. It was going to be sort of invented later. That should always make people a little nervous. The second was the idea of taking a state that had been so successful with its own initiatives, both curriculum development and testing, and turning that over to the federal government made me nervous. The third issue was we had no process in Massachusetts. When we put the MCAS exam in, and by the way, I was there for that too, I spent 5 years on the Board of Education implementing it. We went through that process for almost 2 years, and we gave a lot of people an opportunity to sort of have their say and make their case. One of the big problems with the Common Core and with the park exam is they did not really have much of a process in place for that at all. I continue to believe that the MCAS here has been a big success, and I'm worried a lot about a state that has made so much progress on education and on education reform, turning over sort of its destiny with respect to its educational excellence to some federal bureaucracy.
Very good. Well, we're making great time, and we should get in a fourth round of questioning before we do the closing argument. So I think we have Chris Kamara. Okay, and this is for Mr. Baker.
An energy company is looking to build a pipeline that would carry natural gas from the New York border across Massachusetts to Drake it. Do you support the pipeline? And if you're governor, what role will you play in the approval process?
Massachusetts certainly needs more natural gas capacity than we have now. I would like to see the Commonwealth, and as governor, I would like to see the Commonwealth see if we couldn't pursue expanding our pipeline capacity along some of the existing routes we already have in place. And by the way, I think the other thing we should do, which the state is moving forward on, is to make sure that the pipelines we already have don't leak. There's a fair amount of available capacity is being lost through leaks in the current pipeline system right now.
Mr. Fisher?
I agree that natural gas is a great way to go. It's low cost, it's cleaner, but it has to be, those two things have to be balanced. That and the rights of property owners. Many people are upset. They don't want a solution imposed on them. And we cannot please all the people all the time, but I want to make sure as governor, and I'm going to make this clear, that I want input from those people. Those people that are going to be impacted or affected by the pipeline, I want to hear what they have to say. Maybe there's ways to route that pipeline differently to have a less of an impact or no impact on them. But we have to have a process that doesn't impose on people, but hears from them, be flexible, and see how we can accommodate it as well.
Anything to add to that, Mr. Baker?
The only thing I would say is there's also been, and I've talked about this for over 4 years, we have a unique opportunity in this region to dramatically expand our participation with Canadian hydro, which also is a very renewable, very sustainable, affordable source of energy. And I would like to see Massachusetts lead the rest of the New England region into developing a more significant relationship with the folks in Canada, because there's a lot of power out there. They have a ton of excess capacity. We would have the ability to generate a lot of the renewable and sustainable energy that people would see.
Mr. Fisher? Anything?
Any proposal that reduces energy costs would be great, but we're not going to go after bad sources of energy, whether they be hydro, solar, Cape Wind, which I'm against. They have to provide not only cleaner source of energy, but lower costs as well.
Thank you. Pat Damaris, as the next question is for Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Fisher, community colleges play a vital role in training and retraining the workforce. If you are elected governor, can you share some ideas on how your administration would create access to employer partners and generate more collaboration between businesses and community colleges in Massachusetts?
So I'm a graduate of a community college. It was a wonderful experience. Did a fantastic job in my education. It's an interesting thing. as I said, I went to local schools, I've been to community colleges looking for people to partner with us. We had Manufacturing Day. Manufacturing Day is the first Friday in every October. We had an open house 3 years ago, and we had a number of students from community colleges and both schools come. And many of them tell me that they're looking to go on to further their education, to get either a BS degree or something higher. And I try to tell them that that's fine, that's what I did. But there are good paying jobs out there with associate's degrees. And there shouldn't be any stigma associated with that, either having a technical degree or an associate's degree and going out and finding a good paying job. So I would try to be in a bully pulpit and advocate for that. But then also, I want to make employers aware that there are students in these schools that are looking for good paying jobs, and have the employers talk about them, either through National Manufacturing Day, have open houses, have days where students can come in, maybe just for a day or two, and see that it's not a dirty, smoky environment, that it's clean, and we're using CNC equipment, it's a state-of-the-art, it's not your father's manufacturing environment anymore. And I think that's a good way to incentivize students to go into these types of fields.
Mr. Bacon?
I would say a couple things. One is I would go back to the point I made earlier about Northeastern. We should be over there talking with them and learning from them. They have more intellectual capital in this whole area than practically anybody else in the world. The second thing we should do, some of the VOTech schools already have pretty well-developed co-op programs. I spoke at the co-op dinner that Shawshene Valley Regional Tech School had. They had 600 employers there who are working with juniors and seniors in their school. I think like 100% of the senior class is working one week, going to school the next, working the next week. And there's a lot of opportunity to learn from them as well. I also think I don't know when we decided to get so far away from on-the-job training as we've gotten. We've kind of completely separated everything associated with skill building and skill development from work. And I would like to see if we could get some community colleges to engage with some employers in their community to start creating what I would describe as sort of on-the-job training opportunities where you bring people in and as part of their course curriculum they start working. You can call it a co-op program, you can call it OJT, I don't care. But the bottom line is this would be a focus of my administration as governor and something I believe is a big part of the future, not just for community colleges, but also for career technical schools as well.
Just real quickly, I've tried to have students come from trade school to work in a co-op situation. And I'll tell you a quick story. There was one school that didn't have any seniors that qualified and met the eligibility requirements to be in the program. You have a certain grade point average and not be dismissed for certain things. And my argument back to them was, wait a minute, you won't let them come to work for me in a co-op situation in the fall of their senior year, but when they graduate, they're going to be knocking on my door looking for a job. I think we need to lower the standards to get into the co-op program, and just being on the job, I think, raises a person's initiative and helps them learn the value of a buck and helps them be responsible. That's part of their education as well, not just in the classroom.
The other group we haven't talked much about here, I've attended some of the co-op days that some of the unions have held for mostly kids coming out of both tech schools. But I think there's plenty of opportunity for community colleges, if they're pursuing those types of skill bases, to start to develop relationships with unions as well, and to create a pathway for kids to come through those programs and into some of the openings that the unions have as well.
Okay. Mr. Zupa, your question is from Mr. Baker.
Mr. Baker, we've seen an increasing number of incidents lately involving people with mental health issues, whether they be crimes, police standoffs, and the like. What should the state be doing to address this problem?
Well, I think the first thing the state should be doing is making sure that it has enough capacity, both on an inpatient and an outpatient basis, to serve that population. And while I believe we have more than enough capacity on an outpatient basis, I do believe on an inpatient basis we probably need to add some beds to the system. And in particular, we need to add some beds for women. If a woman ends up getting sectioned, which is what the technical term is for a commitment, there aren't a lot of options for them with respect to accessing mental health services. at all here in the Commonwealth. And I think one of the things we need to do is make sure that we develop more inpatient capacity to deal with that. The other thing we need to do is work with local law enforcement to see if the folks on the social service side, working with the folks in law enforcement, can develop what I would describe as sort of a warm transfer, a soft handoff, whatever it is you want to call it, so that some of the folks who end up in being incarcerated, who really need more than anything what I would describe as clinical treatment, have access to the clinical treatment.
Mr. Fisher?
So we have a number of wonderful programs in place and wonderful people who are working in them. The problem's been, we talked about earlier with local aid, tax revenues are down. Revenues to the state are down. So these programs get cut. There's not enough funding for these programs, and people get cut and can't serve those in need. So what we need to do is grow the economy. I talked about my 4-point program to bring businesses back to Massachusetts and grow the economy. People come off the dole, they go onto the payroll, tax revenues goes up, these programs get funded. You know, we're $120 billion in debt. We can't fund the programs that we like to now at the levels that need to be funded at. But once we start the economy going again, making Massachusetts business friendly, stop driving out businesses and spending $2 billion a year on illegal immigrants, then we can start funding and treating the people who are truly needy and not the greedy.
Thank you. We're going to have one last question before we go into the closing statement. And this comes from a woman who sent me an email today. She's from Dracut, an elderly woman who's lived in her home all her life. She's now raising her daughter's 2 children who are in grade school. Her taxes are rising. She's got on a fixed income, and she said, will you please ask the candidates, how will I be better off 4 years from now under a Republican administration as opposed to a Democratic administration? So that goes to Mr. Fisher first.
Well, I got that question, actually, a week ago. I was at Rosie's place, shelter for homeless women in Boston. And when I go around, I have a campaign stump speech, and I talk about illegal immigration and cost to citizens of Massachusetts, and I talk about EBT card reform and welfare reform. I didn't have the chance to make that point, those 2 points, because the 150 women there that I was talking to asked me first, what are you going to do about illegal immigrants? They're taking the beds in our shelter. They're cutting the line in front of us. They're getting our services. What are you going to do about it? And before I could answer that question, other women said, what are you going to do about these dead people getting EBT cards? This is not a conservative, right-wing Tea Party issue. It's affecting homeless women. It's affecting the woman that Jim just talked about. We don't have a revenue problem in Massachusetts. We have this enormous spending problem. It's being spent on the greedy when it should be spent on the needy. It's being spent on illegal immigrants, and it shouldn't be. It's an enormous amount of money. $400 million in abuse and fraud in the EBT card system. We give EBT cards to over 1,000 dead people. $2 billion to illegal immigrants. That's why this woman has a difficulty. That's why the people at Rosie's place have difficulty. I talked about the solution for illegal immigrants. EBT cards. The requirement for photo ID, no exceptions. Only about 50% of the cards have them now. No exceptions. In those hardship cases where people are bedridden or in their homes, then fine. The caregiver's photo goes on the card as well. No cash from ATMs. EBT cards cannot be used for alcohol, tobacco, pornography, tattoos, and rightly so. But an EBT card recipient can go to an ATM, get cash, and buy those same things. We enforce that. And also a drug test. They have to take it, they have to pass it. Again, we don't reward bad behavior. We don't want to be sponsoring your drug habits. This is the reform of the EBT card system. We use the existing cash we have to help those in need.
Thank you. Mr. Baker?
It's funny, the first question that Chris asked was about the rise in state spending and the drop in local aid. One of the main reasons I've talked about the fact that we need to continue to support local communities is because the people who have the hardest time paying for rising property taxes, paying for more fees, and dealing with service cuts in local communities are the seniors who live in those communities. A big part of why I think the Commonwealth needs to be a better partner to the Commonwealth cities and towns is so that the people who can least afford those increases don't get hit with them. I mean, the people who get hit with property tax increases, I think, and for whom they really hurt, are people who don't have a lot of income but live in their home. Exactly the kind of person you're talking about, Jim. The people who get hit by fee increases, again, people with fixed income. The people who get hit by service cuts, whether it's transportation services or senior centers or other services like that, seniors living on fixed incomes. The Commonwealth needs to be a far better partner to its cities and towns than it's been. And in the Baker administration, we will be.
Thank you. We've now reached that point. We'll have the closing statement. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to state their case. And Mr.
I
Fisher.
should talk about 3 aspects of leadership. The first one is, like anything else, you need to show up. And last night marked the 7th gubernatorial debate forum that Charlie chose to be a no-show at. You got to show up. The second one is you have to access the situation, or assess the situation correctly. When Charlie started his campaign this year, he had an interview with Carl Stevens. And he said, Massachusetts is doing fine. You got it wrong, Charlie. Massachusetts is a mess. And we've doubled the number of food stamp recipients. We've tripled the cost of entitlement programs. $400 million of abuse and fraud in the EBT card system. We give EBT cards to over 1,000 dead people. Illegal immigrants are causing our cities and towns to be dysfunctional. Massachusetts is a mess. And then thirdly, you have to provide solutions. And I'd ask you to go to my website, it's markfisher2014.com, and you will find clear, concise, conservative solutions to the liberal failures in the state of Massachusetts. I've showed up, I've assessed the situation, I got it right, and I've provided clear solutions. That's leadership. I've led, and I will lead. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jim, and thanks to the Lowell Sun and to the folks up here for hosting this debate today. I was in Springfield all day yesterday, and last night spent some time with a pastor and some community leaders in Springfield talking about some of the issues that affect the poorest sections of that city. The reason I got into this race was because I believe we have an opportunity problem in Massachusetts. I'm one of the lucky ones. My dad's sitting right there. My dad and my mom gave us the greatest upbringing you could possibly have in Needham, Massachusetts, a great town with a great school system. My brothers are right there. We all got a great education in that town. I've never had trouble finding work. I'm married up. My wife is here as well, and everybody agrees with that. We have 3 great kids, and we live in the great town of Swampscott where they got a great education. If state government works or not, it's not really going to matter that much to the Baker family. But state government does need to work for a lot of other people in Massachusetts, and so does local government. When I spent 2 hours last night talking to those people in Springfield about all the things that don't work in government, it was revealing. And one of my greatest strengths as a leader and a manager has been my ability to translate what goes on the ground into policy and program at the top of the organization. I did it when I worked in state government for Bill Paul Salucci, and I did it when I took Harvard from basically bankrupt to the #1 player in customer service and member satisfaction in the country for 7 years in a row. I show up and I compete, but most importantly, I have a track record of leadership in large, complex organizations in the public and private sector. And I know that at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who say all kinds of great things about what they can do. But in the end, what matters to voters most is, can you actually execute? When I was at Rosie's Place, there was a woman there who said to me, every 4 years people come here and they say all this happy stuff to us about what they're going to do and how they're going to make things better. And then we don't see them again for 4 years. It's not just about what you say, it's about what you actually do. And that's what voters more than anything are looking for in the next governor. They want somebody who's got a track record that's demonstrated over and over again that in the most difficult situations, they found a way to get it done. And that's why I think I'm going to be the next governor of Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the candidates, Mr. Fisher, Mr. Baker. I want to thank our great panel. I want to remind all of you that the primary election is September 9th. I urge you all to do your part, go out and vote. And a video of this will be up on the websites for the Lowell Sun and also the Sentinel and Enterprise of Fitchburg. Please tell your friends. Thank you for participating. Have a good day.